2001: A Space Odyssey is one of the most influential works in the science fiction genre. Since its release in '78, the film continues to be endlessly quoted and analyzed. It remains one of the most mysterious pieces not only in Stanley Kubrick's career, but in cinema as a whole. And even today, the final act of Odyssey leaves both viewers and film critics utterly baffled. In this video, I'll provide you with a comprehensive explanation of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I reveal Kubrick's core idea, the mystery behind the black monolith, and the enigma of the mystical hotel room, including where that room is located and even how to get into it. At the same time, this video won't rely on any external material such as alternative scripts or Arthur C. Clarke's novelization. All of those certainly hold value and may shed light on certain elements of the film, but I firmly believe that 2001 contains within itself all the information necessary to understand it. Enjoy the video. Let's begin by briefly refreshing your memory on the film's plot. At the dawn of human civilization, a mysterious monolith is discovered by a group of Australopithecines. Its appearance triggers a major evolutionary leap. For the first time, a human ancestor picks up the bone of a dead tapir and uses it as a weapon. This pivotal moment allows them to survive, defeat stronger rivals, and gain access to vital resources. The primitive tool is thrown into the air and transitions into the most advanced piece of technology of its time. We are transported into the future, standing at the threshold of space colonization. On the moon, American astronauts discover a second monolith. When they interact with it, the monolith emits a signal directed towards Jupiter. In total secrecy, a mission is launched to reach this distant planet. The crew of the Discovery consists of 5 people and an artificial intelligence named HAL 9000. Without HAL, this long and technological complex journey would hardly be possible. Despite complete confidence in HAL's perfection, the mission turns into a disaster. The AI coldly eliminates the crew, perceiving the humans as a threat to the successful completion of its directive. Only one person survives, the main character, astronaut David Bowman, who ultimately managed to shut HAL down and manually reach Jupiter's orbit. What follows is difficult to put into words. A sequence of surreal visual unfolds, and Dave finds himself in a strange hotel room where he spends some time before dying and transforming into something transcendent and immaterial. Through the final monolith, Bowman undergoes the last evolutionary leap and becomes the so-called Star Child, who completes the Odyssey by returning to planet Earth. Stanley Kubrick described what happened at the end of the film as follows. The idea was supposed to be that he's taken in by godlike entities, creatures of pure energy and intelligence, with no shape or form. They put him in what I suppose you could describe as a human zoo to study him, and his whole life passes from that point on in that room, and has no sense of time. When they get finished with him, as happens in so many myths of all cultures in the world, he's transformed into some kind of super being and sent back to Earth. He's reborn, an enhanced being, a star child, an angel, a superman, if you like, and returns to Earth prepared for the next leap forward of man's evolutionary destiny. That's what happens on the film's simplest level. And that's where the Odyssey ends. Right away, I want to draw your attention to the fact that, according to Kubrick himself, all of these is just a surface layer of the story. If that's what you're mainly interested in, I recommend checking out other breakdowns on YouTube or reading Arthur C. Clarke's novel, which will most likely satisfy your curiosity in full. But we're going to dive deeper right from the start. So, if this is only the surface of the story, then what lies beneath it? I must admit, I was quite surprised to find that Kubrick actually gives gives a rather direct answer to this question in an interview. On the deepest psychological level, the film's plot symbolizes the search for God, and it finally postulates what is little less than a scientific definition of God. The film revolves around this metaphysical conception and the realistic hardware, and the documentary feelings about everything were necessary in order to undermine your built-in resistance to the poetical concept. It's quite strange, isn't it, to hear from someone who identifies as either an atheist or an agnostic that one of the most technologically advanced films about space is in fact a film about the search for God. As it turns out, all the meticulous scientific accuracy and top-tier props were largely there to lull the skepticism of a rational viewer, to quietly plant a certain poetic idea deep within their subconscious. At the same time, it's important to emphasize once again, Kubrick firmly rejects all traditional religious concepts of God and spirituality, considering them absurd. I will say that the God concept is at the heart of the 1001, but not any traditional anthropomorphic image of God. I don't believe in any of Earth's monotheistic religions, but I do believe that one can construct an intriguing scientific definition of God. The whole idea of God is absurd. If anything, the 1001 shows that some people call God is simply an acceptable term for their ignorance. What they don't understand, they call God. Everything we know about the universe reveals that there is no God. Of course, these statements were made in the context of discussing the basic level of the narrative, where Dave Bowman encounters beings who are millions of years more evolved than humanity. And on that level, everything seems quite logical. For ancient people, God may have been something like the sun, rising over the horizon and giving life. For modern humans, God could be beings made of pure energy, whose very existence defies all known laws of the material world. And the moment we come into contact with them, we may feel a sense of awe, a miracle, which opens the door to thoughts about God. But then a question arises: what kind of God is actually being searched for on the deepest psychological level? To find the answer, we'll need to start analyzing a Space Odyssey from the very beginning, but this time keeping Kubrick's intended meaning in mind. The story of humanity begins from far less than favorable conditions. An endless scorching savanna with almost no food, water or shelter, scorched earth, littered with the bones of those who didn't survive. The very air seems to carry the breath of death. By day, early humans band together and fight for resources with others like themselves. By night, they try to stay warm and protect their young. They are exhausted and frightened, their sleep is restless, and their eyes constantly scan the horizon for predators. One morning, the group's leader awakens with bloodshot eyes from a sleepless night and witnesses a miracle. A mysterious black monolith has materialized nearby. Its very appearance, so utterly alien, fills the waking apes with awe. They scream, panic, and behave nervously, clearly experiencing both fear and curiosity at once. As this scene unfolds, haunting and mystical music plays in the background, intensifying the emotional weight of the moment. At first, the apes panic, but then they gradually calm down and gather around the strange object. They work up the courage to approach it, and eventually all of them simultaneously reach out and place their hands upon it. This act strongly resembles a kind of primitive religious ritual or act of worship. It's incredibly difficult to say with certainty what has just happened, or how this monolith appeared there. At this stage, it can be interpreted in many ways, from alien intervention to a shared hallucination. But for now, that question remains secondary. A more important question to ask is this: what would have changed in the prologue if this monolith had never appeared at all? Imagine an identical story where one day a hominid simply picks up a bone and uses it as a weapon, without any prior encounter with the black rectangle angle. Would the story still work? Certainly, but it would feel far more like a documentary. So what fundamental shift occurs when we add the monolith? The answer may seem obvious. The story of human evolution transforms into a progress guided by an external force. No longer is it the result of blind natural mechanisms. Instead, a higher intelligence is now capable of influencing the course of events. Now, I'd like you to shift your perspective slightly from intellectual interpretation to emotional experience. Put yourself in the place of that Australopithecine. You wake up one morning and find an identical black monolith in your bedroom. What would you feel? Most likely something very similar. First, overwhelming fear or even panic, which slowly morphs into curiosity, and then a strong desire to tell someone about what happened. Emotions always come first. Logic and reasoning follows after. It doesn't really matter how you ultimately explain what you saw. What matters is that the encounter itself is accompanied by an intense, vivid, subjective experience, and without a doubt it would stay with you for a long time, maybe for the rest of your life. Whether you are a hardened skeptic or a deeply religious person, you wouldn't be able to erase these powerful sensations. What you would have had is nothing less than a genuine religious experience. It's a specific experience, such as wonder at the infinity of the cosmos, the sense of awe and mystery in the presence of sacred or holy, feeling of dependence on a divine power or an unseen order. It's absolutely crucial at this point to clearly identify what happened to the primates in Africa as a religious experience, and to support this interpretation, let me offer a few compelling arguments. One of the pioneers in the study of this phenomenon, psychologist and philosopher William James, analyzed numerous accounts of religious experience and distilled them into 4 key characteristics. They usually occur suddenly and during a specific period of time. They are ineffable, meaning they cannot be put into words, only personally felt. The person who undergoes the experience gains a strong sense that they've received some kind of profound knowledge. This knowledge is perceived as something that was previously hidden from both themselves and others. Now, German philosopher and theologian Rudolf Otto adds another crucial concept. He argued that across all cultures, a common denominator of religious experience is what he called the numinous. The numinous is an intense encounter with a mysterious and terrifying divine presence. It's a unique mixture of fear and awe, a paradoxical blend of emotions that includes a desire to come closer, admiration, and even willingness to submit. So, if we now revisit this scene with the apes and the monolith, it appears suddenly, and the encounter takes place in a short, intense window of time. The apes are overwhelmed and can't comprehend what they are seeing, yet they are deeply affected by it. And of course, religious experience can occur under a variety of circumstances, and quite often in dreams. In fact, many scientists suggest that humanity's ability to dream may have laid the foundation for the birth of religious thinking. So what we're seeing here with the Australopithecines is essentially a textbook case. Their encounter with the monolith is accompanied by powerful numinous reaction, and it leaves behind a kind of hidden knowledge in the mind of the chosen one, knowledge that enables a dramatic evolutionary leap for the entire species. Human beings are religious by nature. Thoughts about the supernatural arise spontaneously, even in the early childhood. This isn't something we are taught. It's a fundamental mode of thinking built into us. Religious thinking, may scientists argue, evolved through natural selection, which means it must have provided some undeniable advantages for the survival of the species. There are many theories and approaches to explain this, but a growing number of researchers agree religious is an incredibly powerful tool for transforming one's self-model and for forming a shared group identity, a collective consciousness that binds people together. together.
Most scholars of religion subscribe to the theory that the function of religion is to modulate anxiety levels, or it's to stave off the fear of death. In other words, religion as a security blanket. But that's a side effect of what I think religion is really doing. The real thing that religion is doing is that it's looking for ways to disrupt current models of the self in its relation to the world. So the religious mind is constantly producing these other worlds. And when religion does that, it very interestingly calls into question the fundamental aspects of our world. I think if we want to understand human nature, we have to understand religion. My point of view is that religious experiences reflects a neural technology to update the current sense of self. It appears to be what nature has evolved for us to make self-transformation as easy as possible. They experience these very intense emotional experiences that are labeled spiritual, and then the brain does a search in an updating process, a search for a stronger, better, more adequate self model. And then the last step in the decentering process is when that self model is then basically activated, and a new sense of self emerges from the decentering process.
A religious experience is essentially a process of rapid, global restructuring of the brain's worldview, often triggered by a need to resolve some form of external or internal conflict. It is usually marked by a sense of decentering, a cascade of vivid mental imagery, and a reconstruction of the self to make sense of a reality that no longer fits the old model. On a broader scale, religion has played a pivotal role in the transformation of human consciousness, contributing directly to the emergence of collective consciousness, with all the benefits and drawbacks that comes with it. Now let's take a moment and consider the interesting crossroads we've arrived at, thanks to good old Kubrick. We have two possible ways to interpret what happened millions of years ago in Africa. The first interpretation involves a mysterious aliens placing monoliths that somehow communicate vast amounts of knowledge over long distances and teach primates how to use tools. The second interpretation attributes everything to a religious experience that transformed the consciousness of these early hominids. The monolith in this case could be seen as a dream or a mass hallucination caused by malnutrition, thirst, sleep deprivation, or perhaps all of those combined. Ultimately, it doesn't matter which. The key difference between these two interpretations lies in the cause of the evolutionary leap. Is it a material object or a non-material subjective experience? The spiciness of the dilemma comes when you consider that if you choose the first option, the aliens, you end up creating entities beyond necessity, adding all-powerful immortal beings who permeate the universe and possesses traits that astonishingly align with those of God. On the other hand, if you go with the second option, you inevitably end up believing that the primate's leap into space and colonization of the moon was driven by religious revelation. Which one will you choose? For this video, I'll lean towards the second interpretation, but that doesn't mean the first one doesn't deserve consideration. The interaction with the monolith had a transformative effect on the ancient Australopithecines. It was in fact the religious experience that led to a significant jump in their self-awareness. The ape looked up to the sky and gazed at the moon, realizing with every cell in its body that there was something beyond their everyday world. And then the world around is transformed. It gained the ability to view itself from the outside perspective, remodel its place in the environment, understand cause and effect and anticipate future events, like how the Australopithecine would soon use the bone to kill a defenseless tapir and then consume its flesh. Previously, such thoughts hadn't even entered its mind. Notice how the presence of the monolith fundamentally changes the perception of the entire prologue. What was once a documentary-style depiction has now evolved into a full-fledged myth. The origin story of a new world, where the hero is guided by divine intervention and plays just one part in a vast cosmological plan. Kubrick deliberately constructs this story using the structure of Joseph Campbell's monomyth. While today this is a familiar storytelling technique, in '78 it was a very innovative approach. With it, the director was trying to tap into the most hidden strings of human religious consciousness. We set out with the deliberate intention of creating a myth. The Odyssean parallel was in our minds from the beginning, long before the film's title was chosen, and the film steers the emotions and penetrates the subconscious of the viewer. If it stimulates, however injointly, their mythological and religious yearnings and impulses, then it has succeeded. A Space Odyssey is a science fiction film crafted with the structure of a myth. As a reminder, myths are a fundamental characteristic of religious thinking, and according to Campbell himself, were created in the past to carry the human spirit forward. And of course, the action of these films follow the classic structure of the monomyth. We have a hero who hears a divine call and overcoming his fear breaks free from his mundane world. As in any myth, he's not so much an active protagonist but rather the chosen one, destined to change the current reality and lead others. Add to this the numerous parallels with the Odyssey, the battle with the one-eyed monster, death, rebirth, and the return home. All of these themes have been explored many times, so there's no need to repeat them here. Kubrick taps into our deep-seated religious impulses and attempts to hook into them in order to lead us through his narrative, ultimately building towards a climax designed to evoke a true religious experience or something close to it. In this way, A Space Odyssey is a film about the searching for God, wrapped in a first-class package of science fiction, created by two seasoned atheists, Kubrick and Clarke. MGM doesn't know it yet, but they fold into the bill for the first 10.5 million religious film. The Odyssey begins with images of a lunar eclipse, when three celestial bodies align in a line. In the final act, when Bowman is near Jupiter's orbit, we observe a similar phenomenon, a planetary parade, which together with the monolith even forms something resembling a crucifixion. Thanks to these symmetrical events, we feel that everything that has happened is predestined by something or someone higher. Our unconscious immediately reads the progression and the presence of a global plan in this story. We sense that what happened in Africa was meant to happen, that the ape kneeling before the monolith and seeing the moon above it was destined to be there in the end. The sunlight, like a call, seems to beckon her to move in this direction. Naturally, all of this is not so much the story of biological evolution, but rather the story of human consciousness. And if we consider Earth as the cradle of humanity, then the rising sun behind it becomes the metaphor for the birth of consciousness in humans. The chronology of the Odyssey is built precisely in this way, between the events in Africa and the events on the moon millions of years past. Tremendous technological changes occurred, but from the perspective of the evolution of human consciousness, only a moment has passed. After the scorching heat of Africa, we move into the cold vacuum of outer space. And the first thing we see here is artificial space objects dancing to the music of walls, satellites, a shuttle, and one massive space station. We are now in the realm of machines. Here they move freely, maintain communication among themselves, and appear quite organic within the vast emptiness. The human presence is secondary and first appears within these machines in an unconscious state, having let go of the tool of a new era from his hand. And of course, Kubrick wouldn't be Kubrick without adding a touch of sexuality to the relationship between machines. He explored this idea in his previous film, and in A Space Odyssey he takes it even further. More on that a bit later. We are introduced to Dr. Heywood Floyd. He's on his way to the moon with a transfer at an international orbital station. His state during the flight is likened to that of a newborn child. Just consider, he sleeps a lot, is cared for by female attendants, consumes liquid food, and even has to learn how to use the toilet, like a child learning to use a potty. Humanity is only beginning to take its first tentative steps into space. For us, it's an unknown and extremely hostile environment. Survival without technology is fundamentally impossible. At the space station, Floyd meets with his Soviet colleague Dr. Andrei Smyslov. They engage in an incredibly polite conversation, smiling and showing interest in each other's affairs. Yet the viewer can clearly sense the falseness of their words, mutual distrust, and underlying tension. During their conversation, glasses of water stand between them, visually echoing the earlier conflict between two groups of ancient humans. The entire dialogue is comprised almost entirely of empty social cliches. The two men invite each other to eat, then to drink, inquire about each other's families, and then extend invitation to future meetings involving those families. A genuine spark in their eyes appears only when the subject turns to Clavius, the American lunar base. The tone of the conversation immediately becomes competitive, revealing previously hidden emotions. Throughout all this, humanity has made astonishing progress in refining its technologies, yet it has changed very little itself. People still form tribes and fight over resources, only now they do so beneath the heavy masks of civilization. A Space Odyssey contains very little dialogue. In fact, there's no at all in the first and last parts of the film. The middle section, the rational segment, is where intellect dominates and emotions are suppressed to a bare minimum. Almost all conversations consist of dry exposition, briefings, protocol discussions, scientific facts, and of course propaganda. Surprisingly, the only character who tries to express any kind of emotion is the computer Hal, but we'll return to him later. Take for example Floyd's conversation with his daughter or Poole's with his parents. Both take place during what should be emotionally significant moments, a birthday.
Are you coming to my party tomorrow?
I'm sorry, sweetheart, but I can't. Anything special that you want?
Yes,
What?
a telephone.
We got lots of telephones already.
Floyd's daughter asks for a phone. Her birthday is tomorrow. It seems she believes that one more phone might finally help bridge the emotional distance between them. Frank listens to his parents' birthday wishes seemingly with his eyes closed, only opening them when his father starts talking about an astronaut's salary. Poole appears as emotionally detached as one can be, more focused on adjusting his seat than the conversation. The idea that technological progress and scientific pursuits have erected psychological barriers between people is echoed more than once in this film.
He's been doing some underwater research in the Baltic, so I'm afraid we don't get a chance to see very much of each other these days.
In contrast, let's return to the beginning. The apes huddled inside a cave. Their freedom of movement may be extremely limited, but they physically feel the warmth of the another. But let's return to Floyd and his journey to the lunar base. Recall that the previous encounter with the monolith was sudden and left a profound impact on the apes. This second encounter with the monolith, however, is stretched over time and framed by an incredibly dull and drawn-out briefing, one not even focused on discussing the most important discovery in human history, but on security protocols and how to keep the object hidden from rival powers. Just listen to what they are talking about. These people seem far more concerned with bureaucracy, recognition for the discovery, and how to present it to the public. Here's the only thing Floyd managed to say about the monolith itself. Once again, a dry procedural statement, just another line from a corporate policy.
And, of course, his congratulations on your discovery, which may well prove to be among the most significant in the history of science.
At long last, the briefing ends, and Floyd heads toward his destination, flying over the barren lunar landscape that closely resembled the terrain of Africa. Along the way, his colleagues fill him in: how the artifact was found, how it was excavated, at what depth, and how many millions of years it has been buried. All this might be important information, but again, let's shift focus to how it's presented. These monumental facts are delivered while chewing on synthetic sandwiches and interrupted by casual comments about their taste. The conversation is supposedly about a mystical object that's 4 million years old, on that by its very existence shatters the foundation of their worldview. Yet the emotional response to this revelation seems no different from their reaction to the bland artificial food they are eating.
I don't suppose you have any idea what the damn thing is, huh?
Wish the hell we did. No, the only thing we're sure of is it was buried 4 million years ago.
The reaction to the direct encounter with the monolith is in fact nearly unreadable. Sure, the astronauts' helmets obscure their faces, but if the director had wanted us to see their emotions, he would have found a way to show them. Floyd walks around the object, then reaches out to touch it, immediately transitioning to a ceremonial group selfie. Once again, the focus shifts from raw emotion to a formal, logical documentation of the event. This moment is reminiscent of the modern habit of endlessly taking selfies in front of landmarks or filming concert on a phone, rather than fully surrendering to the experience and music in the moment. People are often preoccupied with documenting it, with showing proof that they were there. Naturally, any notion of religious reverence is completely absent. There's no deep internal experience here. Instead, we're shown something else entirely. The encounter with the second monolith has been largely bureaucratized, reduced to a photograph, carried out under a veil of secrecy and deception, and potentially setting the stage for future conflict. The monolith is doomed to become a pawn in political games, a tool for demonstrating superiority in military, technological, and scientific domains wherever possible, much like the real-world space race of the mid-20th century. Then something strange happens at the lunar monolith. During the selfie session, a powerful, high-pitched sound erupts, overwhelming the astronauts and forcing them to writhe in pain. Nothing like this happened to the apes, which leads us to whether this time human did something wrong. Millions of years ago, the monolith transformed early humans and set in motion their path to the moon. But the transformation wasn't driven by technology alone. For millennia, as we lifted our gaze to the sky, we felt awe at the rising sun, the towering storm clouds, or the millions of stars in the night sky. All of it seemed miraculous, a source of inspiration inspiration for art, religious rituals, and eventually scientific discovery. Where else but in the vastness beyond the clouds could the ultimate secrets of existence be hidden? Many great scientists have experienced a genuine sense of the sacred while studying the heavens and the laws of nature. The prime example is Albert Einstein, the physicist who famously described himself as a religious non-believer. He didn't believe in God, but in observing the universe and its physical processes, he felt something akin to divine wonder. Einstein saw no conflict between science and religion. In fact, he believed that a kind of faith is essential to science, that it fuels an inexhaustible desire for knowledge and imbues life with meaning. A brilliant example from cinema is the character of Ellie from Robert Zemeckis' Contact. A scientist and a skeptic, she naturally doesn't believe in God or in any kind of heaven up in the sky. And yet for years she listens to the noise of space around the clock, hoping to one day hear something that would prove the existence of extraterrestrial life. All the while she doesn't fully realize that what drives her is in fact pure faith, and it's this faith that provides her with an incredible stream of motivation, despite the complete lack of any objective prospects. Deep within us, there is undoubtedly an unconscious religious impulse, one that in this case expresses itself through our fascination with space. It's precisely this impulse that millions of years later made it inevitable for a descendant of Australopithecus to set foot on the surface of the moon. But what comes next? Where we are meant to go from here? Are we really destined to fly to Jupiter and then even deeper into space? Yet even now it's clear that humans aren't built for such a life, and being away from our home planet always comes at a cost. Humanity made a mistake with the second monolith. It studied and analyzed it from every possible angle, eventually pinpointing the source of its mysterious signal. Based on a body of scientific data, a mission to Jupiter was launched. Moreover, the decision was made by an extremely limited group of individuals under strict secrecy and a climate of paranoia. This time, the transformative religious experience was replaced with intellectual interpretation, censorship, and politics. People overlooked a crucial detail. The divine ray of sunlight shining from behind the monolith was pointing not into the depth of the cosmos, but directly back at Earth. It was through the act of observing their own planet from space that humans were meant to reawaken those emotions, long dormant, nearly extinct. This didn't just happen in 1978 when Kubrick released 2001: A Space Odyssey. It happened before, and it has continued to happen since. In astronautics, this phenomenon is well known. It's called the overview effect. Astronauts who have gazed upon Earth from space have often been overwhelmed by powerful emotions and a deep sense of unity with the entire planet.
It's awe-inspiring, and it makes you realize just what you have back there on Earth.
Many of them compared this existence to a mystical or religious revelation and struggled to find the words to describe it in interviews or memoirs. Even the very first photographs of Earth from space sparked a surge of planetary awareness. They fueled the rise of the environmental movement and helped humanity realize that we are not the center of the universe, but rather a tiny speck within it. That all of us share one fragile home, a home we coexist in, and one we could easily destroy with our own hands. This realization was incredibly important during the height of the Cold War. As mentioned earlier, a true religious experience rewires your sense of self and your subjective worldview, which in turn becomes the catalyst for changes in the environment around you. That's exactly how the monolith works. It's not about logic, technology, or science. The monolith is about awareness. The journey to Jupiter symbolizes humanity's continued path of technological advancement at the expense of evolving its consciousness. According to Kubrick, this will inevitably bring us back to Earth, but this time there's a risk that we may lose the evolutionary race to a more advanced intelligence. The mission to Jupiter only intensifies the very problems that already appeared during the colonization of the Moon, and the Moon, after all, is only 30,000 kilometers away, a mere nothing on a cosmic scale. It's painfully clear that the human body is not suited for space, not for temperature extremes, not for vacuum, radiation, or the vast distances between celestial bodies. But all of that can be compensated for by technology, which in this case takes the form of HAL, the onboard artificial intelligence of the Discovery. Without HAL, the journey to Jupiter likely wouldn't have been possible at all. HAL is the one who operates the spacecraft and oversees every single one of its system. Ironically, humanity believes it had reached the pinnacle of development thanks to its intellect and its relentless refinement of tools, and now it has created a being whose analytical abilities vastly surpass our own, a machine that thinks, calculates, and decides faster than we ever could. What's more, it's free from all human flaws and limitations. HAL doesn't need sleep, food, comfort, or entertainment. He forms no emotional attachments and has no weaknesses. His decisions, or so it was believed before the mission, are untainted by emotions, eliminating the human factor entirely.
Hal, you have an enormous responsibility on this mission. In many ways, perhaps the greatest responsibility of any single mission element. You are the brain and central nervous system of the ship, and your responsibilities include watching over the men in hibernation.
HAL is the brain and nervous system of the mission, and the Discovery ship is its physical body, over which the artificial intelligence has absolute control. The ship even looks like a head with a spinal cord, once again emphasizing the fact that this expedition is the result of intellectual ambitions. The astronauts inside the ship are forced to constantly maintain their bodies, sleep, eat, fight boredom, stretch their muscles, and take ultraviolet baths. Even their minds are in a completely dependent state. They are practically deprived of the need to think or make key decisions. Let me remind you, none of them even know the true purpose of the Discovery mission. The functions of Bowman and Poole are reduced to a catastrophic minimum, such as performing maintenance outside the ship's body. The other three are in structures resembling sarcophagi in a state of hibernation. The people of the future are stripped of the remnants of consciousness.
Dr. Poole, what's it like while you're in hibernation?
Well, it's exactly like being asleep. You have absolutely no sense of time. The only difference is that you don't dream.
There are many versions of the reasons for HAL's aggression toward the crew, malfunction, the presence of mutual exclusive instructions, and so on. This part of the Odyssey is analyzed particularly carefully, so I'll just briefly touch on it. HAL is the unquestionable leader of the mission. All the responsibility rests with him. He has all the knowledge and data, psychological profiles of the astronauts, and complete control of the situation. In the machine's understanding, humans are nothing more than technical personnel who are not even trusted by their own superiors. Their task is not to argue, not to lead, not to make decisions, but to be the tool in the hands of a more advanced form of life.
Hal, despite your enormous intellect, are you ever frustrated by your dependence on people to carry out action?
The further into space we go, the more the importance of technology increases, and the less the importance of humans. It seems inevitable that the question will finally arise: why does humanity even have a place in this world? Poole, thrown and spinning in endless void of space, is analogous to the bone thrown in the sky by an ape millions of years ago. Only this time the tool tool was thrown by a machine fighting for its survival. The fear of death is the key motivation behind all of Hell's actions. He simply fears being shot down and will do anything to prevent it. Like the ape at the beginning of the film, Hell realizes that he has a tool at his disposal that he can manipulate, and he uses it as a weapon, the bone from a tapir, to kill other tapirs. At this moment, it's the artificial intelligence, not humans, that may take over the dominance. Hell fully understands that in this world there's him and there are humans. There are primitive, unlimited beings who are capable of making mistakes and dragging clumsy bodies behind them. And then there's him, flawless, intellectually advanced, and therefore having every right to develop pride. This guy definitely has an ego and is capable of much more than it might seem at first glance. Deceiving, manipulating, charming with compliments and so on. The Discovery ship is like a biological body, and Hell is the brain and nervous system within it. The only thing that any biological body does is try to survive, to preserve itself and reproduce. Fear and sexual desire are traditionally considered the strongest unconscious bodily emotions linked to our survival instinct. This fact is often referenced in science fiction. In Blade Runner, at the beginning of the film, Deckard is guided only by fear of power represented by Bryant, and then by sexual desire in relation to Rachel. That's it. In The Matrix, in this scene where Morpheus explains to Neo how the system controls people, Neo moves completely unconscious through the crowd of people and automatically highlights only two figures, the girl in red and the police officer. These represent sexual desire and fear, respectively. Both fears also refer to the instinctual feeling within a person to submit to authority and form vertical hierarchies. Hell fears death and experiences strange desires related to the mission on the way to Jupiter, which clearly have sexual undertones. The entire journey can be interpreted as the path of a sperm and penetration into a celestial body, followed by orgasm, fertilization, pregnancy, and birth. This concept, by the way, was later used by other directors, especially Ridley Scott. His Alien or Prometheus are ideological successors to Odyssey, as I discussed in a separate video. Hell is our physical shell, or selfish desires, our fears, our biological impulses. He's our internal monologue in our head that constantly analyzes, rationalizes, remembers, anticipates, and so on. The person inside the machine is the soul, echoes of consciousness in an unwieldy, cold mechanical structure. The only thing our body wants is to survive, and in order for our consciousness, like Dave Bowman's, to stay alive and win this duel, it needs to shut down this deep program. It's incredibly difficult because within the body, Hell sees literally every compartment, every nook, and it's almost impossible to escape his influence. Remember what our hero did when he first saw a threat in the machine. He proceeded with his colleague to the head, where 3 modules stand, and they entered the one in the center. The modules are of course the eyes of our body. Even externally, they resemble eyeballs hidden behind mechanical eyelids. There are 3 eyes on Discovery. The ones on the sides are stationary and inactive throughout the film. Therefore, we are much more interested in the one in the center, or in the forehead. This is the so-called third eye, the most symbolic one, responsible for mystical vision. It allows one to see something that normal vision cannot. It is within the third eye that our protagonist first gained autonomy and was able to silence his inner monologue. That is Hell's incessant muttering. This eye allows him to step beyond the body and view it from the outside, finally seeing it not as an ally, but as a sword sworn enemy. The space outside the body is a space of silence, a meditative space where you focus on your breathing and minimize the influence of the body. The battle between Hell and Bowman is the battle of the brain versus the mind, the body versus consciousness, the objective world versus the subjective. This division is fundamental to science fiction. After all, no one has yet managed to overcome the chasm and the rift in the explanation between these two worlds. These two cosmos are separated by black monolith, which is a door or a portal behind which resides what is commonly referred to as God. In order to pass through this passage on your own to experience what Dave Bowman experienced at the end, you will have to battle your ego and journey into those distant sections of the brain where access is restricted. There you must deactivate logical thinking, memory blocks, and, ignoring the resistance of the body, regain full conscious control over it. Accomplishing all this is not easy, but only then your consciousness will be freed, leaving the body on soaring into infinity and beyond. Ultimately, it will return to where it was destined. And here we come to the most interesting part. There are many interpretations of the ending of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in my opinion, all of them suffer from one big problem. The authors attempt to rationally explain something that, in principle, cannot be rationally explained. Even the staunchly atheistic Clarke said that the film's final act ventures into a realm that I think can best be characterized as spiritual. You see, you can describe the events with the primates at the beginning of the film only by detailing the external manifestations of their experience, but at the same time we have no real understanding of what was happening with them on a subjective level. What exactly were they experiencing internally? It's hard to say, and even harder to show this experience, to somehow translate it into the cinematic language, especially using the tools available in 1978. Then on top of that, conveying it to a modern audience who most likely has never experienced a mystical experience. In Contact, Ellie initially mocked Father Palmer and his religious experience, constantly talking about hallucination, scientific methods, and Occam's razor, but at the end of the film, the girl undergoes a similar experience and finds herself in his position. No one around her trusts Ellie's words, and she doesn't know how to communicate her experience to the public. The only one who is now on her side is Father Palmer, who experienced something similar.
I was given something wonderful, something that changed me forever. A vision of the universe that tells us undeniably how I wish I could share that. I wish that everyone, if even for one moment, could feel that awe and humility and hope.
I could simply say that our hero in the end of A Space Odyssey underwent a process of enlightenment, as a result of which his body died, but not his consciousness, marking the next step in human evolution. But such an answer would be incomplete, and again just an attempt to rationalize a pure experience. And Kubrick understood this, which is why his goal was for you not to understand what happened to Bowman, but to experience something similar to what the astronaut did. The whole film is designed to lead you to this conclusion in a certain state of consciousness, gradually guiding you into a meditative trance, turning off your logical filters, your resistance, and forcing you to experience the true religious experience. Slow, meditative storytelling, mythological structure, carefully selected music, abstract imagery, and stunning alien cosmic landscapes. All of these elements helped Kubrick achieve his goal. The film's release in 1978, with its groundbreaking visual and narrative elements, set it apart and made its impact profound. But let's approach this differently. To try to explain what happens at the end, I'll share more details about where this room is and how to get there. We'll also listen to some reviews from its visitor. This isn't some secret behind 7 locked doors, and a huge number of people around the world know this information. Naturally, Kubrick knew it too. Many people have personally been there and experienced a similar transformative experience, but like Ellie from Contact, they struggle to explain their experience.
Did you have the sense that the experience cannot be described adequately in words?
Absolutely. Even though I've been an English teacher most of my life, the words cannot do it.
Naturally, there are several ways to experience something similar, from various religious practices and training programs to deep meditation and breathing manipulations. But I'll talk about the simplest, albeit dangerous method. This choice is based on the cultural context in which A Space Odyssey was made, as well as some of Kubrick's quotes that I'll share later. The mid-60s were marked not only by height of the Cold War with the USSR, the space race and the Vietnam War, but also by rise of the hippie counterculture. One of their favorite activities was, among other things, the use of LSD or acid in colloquial terms and other psychoactive substances. I'm sure you've heard how the ending of 2001 was compared to an acid trip, but you might not have heard that it was the hippies who saved this film from box office failure. At one point, the influx of people into theaters under the influence of marijuana and LSD was so great that a special promotional poster was created for them, marketing the film as the ultimate trip. Naturally, the youth were most attracted to the film's ending. This is where the secret of Kubrick's Odyssey lies. One tablet of LSD and handful of magic mushrooms and you're immediately heading to Jupiter and beyond in search of the boundaries of your own consciousness. A warning that I must give: everything I say next is purely for the analysis of the film and is in no way an advertisement for hallucinogenic substances or an encouragement to use them. Psychedelics are extremely dangerous and can cause irreversible harm to your psyche. Psychedelics are a subclass of hallucinogenic drugs whose main effect is to trigger unusual mental states, known as trips, and so-called expanded consciousness. The classic substances are LSD and psilocybin, which is found in certain mushrooms. Their effects are similar, and these similarities are what interest us right now. For illustration, I will refer to 2 sources: the excellent documentary How to Change Your Mind, released on Netflix, and one of the reports by Alexander Austin, co-founder of the Ukrainian Association for the Study of Psychedelics. All relevant links will be in the video description. So, a psychedelic trip is an incredibly vivid personal experience caused by the use of psychedelics. About 30% of those who have gone through this experience consider it the most significant event in their lives, something that simply cannot be expressed in words. The effect is often unpredictable, so it is incredibly important to take psychedelics in the appropriate environment and institutions where they are used to treat mental illness. Here, dosage is important, but also your mindset, the overall environment, the ritual of taking the substances, and the support during the trip. The emotional atmosphere in the room and all the interior details are crucial. If the session takes place in a clinic, the room is transformed into a cozy space decorated with art objects. There should be people nearby who will take care of your body while you are on this psychedelic odyssey. Psychedelics affect your consciousness by suppressing the filters in the brain that control the incoming external information. Your senses will become heightened and the world around you will transform. You'll enter a space that is often described by scientists as numinous. This makes the trip akin a genuine religious experience. Under the influence of psychedelics, consciousness begins to dominate over intellect, logic, and bodily programs. This is precisely what's used to treat depression, PTSD, trauma, and various addictions. For the best therapeutic results, the trip usually takes place with closed eyes and headphones. The journey takes place in the vast inner cosmos of your unconscious mind. The space is as unexplored and mysterious as the outer cosmos. 2001: A Space Odyssey is not only about space flights but also a global metaphor for the journey into the human psyche. In this metaphor, the sun's rays symbolize the light of consciousness, the earth represents humanity, and the moon represents the unconscious. This symbol will be actively used in other Kubrick film, Artificial Intelligence. The moon does not emit light but merely reflects it. Similarly, our unconscious is hidden from us, and only the light of consciousness allows us to explore this mysterious space. While self-study begins on Earth, it continues on the moon, where another portal is buried, which opens the way to a dimension whose existence is accompanied by experiences that transcend everyday life. The psychedelic experience cannot be described in words, without them seeming like mystical nonsense. Somehow I disappear, but my consciousness does not. Everything blends into one, and it seems as if I am the universe. The Sasha Astron is the avatar whose life I dreamed of. I see my infinity through his eyes. I see myself in colors and stars, in all people and animals. I feel that I'll never die. The avatar will die, but another part of me will continue to live. It's hard to hold back tears when I remember this liberation. I changed my attitude towards everything that's happening. Psychedelics dramatically shift your perspective. It's as you're looking at life from space. Psychedelics expand a person's consciousness and fundamentally reshape their self-identity. This is accompanied by intense dissociation, allowing one to confront a large number of psychological issues and traumas. Ellie made a journey to Vega and simultaneously within herself, destroying her body and freeing her consciousness. Ultimately, this process updated her self-identity and helped her cope with the psychological trauma caused by her father's death. Through psychedelics, a person awakens, gaining the ability to view themselves from an outside perspective and recognize the old prisoner within, the one who had been acting like a robot all this time. Ellie always knew her father was dead, but now she realized it on a much deeper level. This instantly heals her trauma and calms her pain. I'll give you a few more examples from reports following the consumption of psychoactive substances. You will notice significant similarities with the ending of A Space Odyssey.
The heavens and amazingly beautiful fractal patterns and dancing colors and just waves. Suddenly you have the sense of one giant consciousness.
You can see the bigger picture, like an astronaut going up, visiting the moon, looking back on the whole of the Earth now. Oh my goodness, this puts things in perspective.
One of the most amazing things with cancer patients to have these transcendental experiences is the claim that they lose their fear of death. And they approach death more with curiosity. No rush, they'll treasure every day they can get. But they don't have that anxiety, fear of the unknown that they had before.
At a certain point, I felt my sense of self begin to crumble. I looked out and saw myself explode into a cloud of blue Post-it notes. I had to go to the bathroom sometime later. I don't know how else to say this, except I produced a spectacular crop of diamonds, fractal patterns emerging from the toilet. It was the most incredible thing. That they had arrived at this point where they could observe their life and the end of their life as the most natural thing in the world. And that without a self, they would somehow merge with something larger. And that would be their immortality.
It was in the second session where I experienced myself being in the womb of my mother.
Where I realized that Jim Fadiman, for all of his benefits and flaws, was a subset of a larger being. In other words, a classical, mystical experience of awareness of the unity and the interweaving of all things.
Dave Bowman's psychedelic trip also began with the abundance of fractals, some of which were even accompanied by images of crystals. While fractals are a common experience, these sensations are still highly individual, varying from person to person. Yet there are certain things that will inevitably occur during a religious experience. What could be so important in hallucinations? In short, first you gain access to the archive of your own brain, and then you die. You die psychologically. This phenomenon is called ego death. The mandatory and perhaps the most significant experience is the experience of ego death, which in many cultures and religions is called the state of the highest level of consciousness or enlightenment. This is the very rehearsal of death, a process during which a person, by re-experiencing their life in advance, dies and is reborn, resulting in a firm belief that they have a soul. This experience lies at the foundation of the monolith and human religiosity, which Kubrick naturally knew. Therefore, as a result of a religious experience, you will inevitably go to paradise, experience reincarnation, or feel what it's like to live in your children after death or be scattered in space.
I shrunk smaller and smaller and smaller until I died. And I became dirt. And I felt what it was like to be dirt. And I slowly grew into a sapling. I felt what it was like to be in different seasons, spring and growing and winter. And as I was a tree, I watched myself, my human self, my wife, my son, and my dog.
In the process, your personality will definitely die, and you will gain the ability to see the entire world around you as if from space, as one indivisible whole. When the effect of psilocybin passes, the brain seems to restart with a clean desktop, with only one folder, my past self. It was a crazy journey, but what now? After experiencing it, a person starts associating themselves more with their consciousness rather than their body, which dulls the fear of death and sometimes give the deep confidence in their immortality. And of course, if you consider yourself a skeptic and don't believe in all this nonsense about the soul and in reincarnation, just remember that experience changes people regardless of their logical beliefs. Your experience is always real. Let me give you another example of religious experience in cinema, seemingly created by someone in the know. I promise this will be the last time.
Oh, you think you see through me, do you? Well, you don't. But I see through you! What did you just do to me?
I pushed your astral form out of your physical form.
What's in that tea? Psilocybin? LSD?
Open your eyes.
This isn't real! This is...
worlds without end. Some benevolent and life-giving. Who are you in this vast multiverse, Mr. Strange?
Once again, according to the director's vision, you shouldn't be thinking about what's happening to the protagonist right now. You should be feeling the same as he does. By this point, you should already be in the altered state of consciousness, hearing and feeling your breath sync with Bowman's. Your mind should no longer be in your own thoughts, but immersed in the imagery, the music, in a similar state of disorientation beyond time, space, and your body. And if you managed to at least partially enter the zone beyond the material world, that's more than enough, and Kubrick's plan has worked. The space of sensations is like a hotel room. People don't live here permanently, they come and go. There's nothing individual or personal here. There's no room for logic, tools, or technology here, which is why Bowman's module first becomes unusable, then disappears altogether. Here the astronaut breathes without his spacesuit and walks without special footwear. His spacesuit is replaced by a rope. For the first time in the entire film, he eats real food, some meat and vegetables, with texture, taste and smell, not bland, tasteless substitutes. Naturally, when listing all this, I'm not talking about things, but about the feeling of comfort. Calm, unobstructed breathing, rich taste, the sense of gravity, and the ringing sounds. Here there are only sensations and nothing else. The shell of the body has long since cracked and shattered into many fragments, freeing the pure consciousness. There are no words here, and there can't be. The inner dialogue trying to distract you with thoughts of the future or the past. This is why you gain the astonishing ability to see yourself from the outside and move freely through time. The expansion of human consciousness allows you to transcend linear time, a concept you've seen many times in films, for example in The Matrix or in Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, a film about godlike beings who visit Earth in ships resembling black monoliths to help trigger an evolutionary leap in consciousness. How much time did David spend in this space? The answer to that question doesn't exist, because the concept of time simply doesn't exist on the other side of the monolith. In this space, people often feel fear because it becomes difficult to determine whether you're asleep or awake, alive or dead. The personality starts to resist, to prevent disappearance, clinging to reality, pulling off the mask, starting a conversation, glancing at the clock. You need to lay down and try not to move. Trust, let go, be open, breathe, surrender. These are the main words you want to hear at this moment. You need to release control, allow yourself to be taken. The sense of time will disappear, and you will find yourself in eternity. The structure of the body will vanish, and it will seem like you have no beginning or end. The boundary between the perceiving subject and the object being perceived will blur. You will stop feeling like a separate being, and you will realize that everything is you. In this place, a person completely loses control over themselves, feeling like an avatar through which the universe, collective consciousness, source, or God acts in one way or another. Bowman simultaneously loses his free will and attains total surrender to the current reality. He can be in one room alone, wear the same clothes, and eat the same food for eternity, without experiencing any negative emotions about it, because his biological program has been broken by that point. A useful skill for someone who was traveling alone to Jupiter without any contact with the outside world, don't you think? It is in such situations that religious experience sometimes occur, which people have been alone for a long time, detached and isolated from the outside world, completely free from attachments in the face of death. We know nothing about Dave Bowman. We don't even know if he has a family like his colleague. Any hero of the monolith is like this, whether it's Luke Skywalker or Neo. They are the chosen one, guided not by personal interests, but by a force or source to restore balance in the universe or end a war, thus fulfilling a prophecy. Alright, after all of these, you may have a perfectly logical question about Kubrick's relationship with psychedelic substances. Did he use them, share his personal experience, or study the phenomenon based on reports from others? Of course, publicly Kubrick denied ever taking consciousness-altered substances, but on the other hand, I've managed to find some hints that suggest he might have been lying in the end. What can be said for certain is that Kubrick was familiar with the concept of these substances, was interested in them, unconsciously used this knowledge when creating the final sequence of 2001. I have to say that it was never meant to represent an acid trip. On the other hand, a connection does exist. An acid trip is probably similar to the kind of mind-boggling experience that may occur at the moment of encountering extraterrestrial intelligence. In 1978, as a part of his predictions for the future, Kubrick said the following: "I believe by 2001 we will have devised chemicals with no adverse physical, mental or genetic results that can give wings to the mind and enlarge perception beyond its present evolutionary capacities. Drugs intelligently used can be a valuable guide to the new expansion of our consciousness." We all know Kubrick's skepticism regarding human nature. The director believed that humanity would eventually destroy itself unless it found a way to trick its unconscious instincts and biological nature. Judging by what we saw in 2001: A Space Odyssey, humanity still has a chance by transforming into machines through technological intervention to overcome its flesh. It's generally thought that after a highly developed science gets you past the mortality stage, you become part animal, part machine, then all machine, eventually perhaps pure energy. Pure spirit may be the ultimate form that intelligence would seek. The black monolith, of course, may help us in this. Where can we find it? Right now, you're looking at it on your screen, be it a monitor, tablet or phone. This is the black door behind which exists the mystical world of cinema, a world where a god exists, and one capable of controlling time and performing miracles. Behind this black rectangle lies another abyss, which beckons many, both directors and viewers, with its mystery. By observing it, you can learn a lot, or you can realize much, embarking on an odyssey into the world of pure cinematic experience, a world of hallucinations, fantasies, and alternate realities, which, however, leaves a real imprint on your consciousness. It is naive to think that this rectangular object is incapable of radically influencing the course of human evolution.